It's been a long time coming for me to discuss this series. Be surprising, my thoughts on it have changed a little bit. It's a good thing that I actually didn't cover it because now it's not the worst Hulk series anymore. Incredible Hulk Season 2 and Hulk Agents of Smash have been dethroned with this piece of garbage. Now, if you ever read Twitter or my thoughts on Hulk from my other past videos, you know I'm very hard on this series. And to be fair, it does deserve it because it does so many different changes. It's so ridiculous. However, it's better than what I originally thought. The reason why I've really hated the show was when I originally saw the series, I had saw it from the beginning up into episode 9. Now, if you're familiar with the series, episode 9 was when they did the golf episode, and they had this dumb premise of them shrinking, and it was so ridiculous, and that's when I cut it off. But because I stopped watching at that point, episode 10 and on, the show got marginally better. Like, immediately right after that episode, the next one was about Thor, and it was like, this is what the show should have been. More normal action drama series. But the previous episode was so bad, I just gave up on it. Now, while the show did improve, it still has a lot of issues, and it still has a ton of things that I hated and really despised. Let's start off with the characters. Now, Hulk Agent of Smash is basically a carbon copy of Ultimate Spider-Man. I don't know why they did this. I know Hulk Agent of Smash and Ultimate Spider-Man are sister shows. They were produced roughly around the same time with the same team. But that doesn't mean you copy them literally bit from bit. In Ultimate Spider-Man, Spider-Man is teamed up with, 4 other superheroes to make a team. And Hulk Agent of Smash does the exact same thing. It works for Ultimate Spider-Man because Spider-Man does work with the team. While Hulk and the other characters, this really doesn't work because mainly what happens is it kind of just feels like they transposed the Fantastic Four on top of the series. It's very similar from having a group of 4 characters. Some of them are goofballs, some of them annoy each other, and they have the same exact separating special flying vehicles. But the main issue of why I never liked this show was because of how they changed all the characters. Every single one of them, from Hulk to Scar, all of them are altered in some ridiculous way. Now, personally, I don't care about A-Bomb and Red Hulk. I never liked the Red Hulk story with Jeff Loeb. It was very generic, it was very boring, it was predictable. But also my main issue is that when you convert the civilian characters into superheroes or anti-heroes in Red Hulk's case, it becomes boring. Mainly, Red Hulk is generic copy. Yes, it's Ross. What you liked about Ross is really not here anymore. But not just that. What really ticked me off was not just the way they altered the characters. The premise around the entire series was really ridiculous. The main concept of the show is that Rick Jones is this, YouTuber-like personality that basically streams all the adventures that he goes on with Hulk. And it's kind of framed like Total Drama Island. You know how in the series they go through all those crazy adventures and stuff, and then they would always talk inside, the bathroom with the camera, talking to the people, giving us background of the characters. They would do the exact same thing in Hulk Agent of Smash. It did not fit the show. It was very cumbersome. And also, the talking to the camera bits are basically fourth wall breaks because there's clear continuity issues whenever they do it, so they're out of show. The episode where I talked about they shrunk, whenever they went to the filming of the characters, they would be small, but they clearly know what goes on throughout the episode. So obviously everything's always occurred, so why are they small in it? At the end of the day, the camera stuff was basically as a joke. It's not supposed to be treated seriously. Another problem that the Rick Show does to the series is that Rick has to bring, special cameras throughout all the episodes. The constant problem is half the time they don't get destroyed. They're okay throughout the thing. They never use them in any, positive way. For example, they don't hide any weapons in them. They don't go for help. They don't find the Hulks when they get separated, things like that. They're never used in any proactive way to the story. They're always there somehow. They never get destroyed. The villains almost never use them in any negative way, with rare occasions. So they're just basically a big plot hole and a thing that's just more ridiculous on top of more ridiculous. What also is more annoying is that the show doesn't know what it wants to be. Because they're basically copying Fantastic Four, Ultimate Spider-Man, one side of it wants to be kind of a deep, serious drama show, which is what The Incredible Hulk is. You just can't get away from that. But on the other hand, it wants to be this very snide, comical, stupid character bits to be a laugh, and it's just like every which way you go it clashes. There's either a dumb joke, the characters act very stupid, or they're like, oh, let's make this character have a quirky trait, and it doesn't make any sense because it's just like you're completely ignoring what the Hulks are. Now, one of the biggest issues of the show is all characters are basically out of character, with the exception of Hulk, but even then you can still complain about like how he acts and what he does. Some bits of him are accurate, but then there's other bits where it's just like they completely ignore their human sides of all the characters basically, and they just treat them like that doesn't really exist, and it's just the hero sides. Everyone's origin story was basically changed except for Bruce's and General Ross, but even then it doesn't really matter because, again, since they don't focus on their human sides, it's kind of just simply forgotten about. The worst being Scar. I'll get to him later. But She-Hulk was also altered in some really bizarre ways. And the main reason why they did this was because, you know how Hulk always is the one who's tormented, who has to suffer. So they wanted to do the same thing with all the characters. So Hulk, Scar, She-Hulk, Red Hulk all suffer or tormented monsters. But it doesn't really make any sense in the context of how they even altered the characters and where the characters came from. For example, why would people fear Red Hulk when everyone knows Red Hulk was Thunderbolt Ross, and he's the one who's been always going against Hulk for years, and now he's okay to work with him? So wouldn't you think the population who feared Hulk would be like, okay, so if this guy is okay to work with him, isn't that kind of a good judgment call to say, okay, Hulk is not really a monster? Second issue with this, now She-Hulk's origin is completely changed. She's no longer a lawyer, she's a stunt woman. Everyone is still trying to portray her as, you know, again, a monster, tormented soul, but she works as a stunt woman. And the first time we see her, she's doing an action film scene, and everyone's happy to be around her. So how can she be a monster when she's working at a standard job? It doesn't work in any way to make her be a tormented soul like Hulk is. And since it alters her original, you know, personality, her original career, it makes everything worse. Now, Scar is the worst alter. Now, I mean, I don't hate Scar. I never really did. I mean, he's like the last of the Hulk characters that I'm okay with. He's like the one who had like the most originality out of the ones that came in recent years. Now, at the beginning of the series, you know, Scar came in and everyone was confused who he was. And it was supposed to be this big reveal. And when I first saw the show, I was like, oh, okay, maybe, you know, they're going to do something interesting, like, oh, we're going to involve time travel, because how can Scar be here and Hulk not know who he is? Because again, in the comic, Scar is Hulk's son, who dealt with, you know, a huge, you know, story plot point in the comics, which again got skipped in this show, then got also skipped in the MCU, which, you know, Hulk never gets a break. Every single time we have like a really like interesting story for Hulk, it just completely gets screwed. So I was thinking maybe we're going to involve, you know, time travel when they finally reveal who Scar is to Hulk and everyone else. It's going to be kind of like shocking. He's going to, you know, don't know what to say. And then he's maybe not going to believe it. But that never happened, because at the end of the day, when it got revealed, all we found out, oh, he was from an alien planet. And I'm like, right. How does someone from an alien planet get the same Hulk powers that were from Earth? Because you altered his story, it no longer makes sense. But who cares about that? Let's focus on the comedy.
What did you have for lunch?
Now, the biggest offender, of course, is the jokes. But the worst affected by this is Rick Jones and, ironically, Red Hulk. Both of them are just endlessly comedy, comedy, comedy. And you look, I like Seth Green. He was casted perfectly, but the problem is the entire show doesn't work as a comedic element. The thing I didn't understand, skipping aside that I hated the show because of the changes they did, why would you want to repeat yourself? Ultimate Spider-Man. Spider-Man in general can be funny and goofy, and that type of series gives you a lot of leeway on why would you want to copy literally everything from your first show into your second show rather than being kind of the opposite, because that's what I was thinking they were going to do. Spider-Man would be the goofy one, and Hulk Agents of Smash can be the more serious tone show. The jokes forcibly screw characters and logic into the series. For example, we know the Hulk characters are extremely strong, right? Well, She-Hulk, for some odd reason, hates the cold. That makes no sense. I'm sorry. If you're a super strong character, you're not going to be fazed by heat or cold, and it's contradicted within the series itself. There was a particular time in, I think, the season finale of season 1 where Hulk was trapped in space. Space is virtually absolute zero. He survived in it. He can't breathe, but he survived it. So it's negative 400 degrees. He's okay with it, but on Earth, when they're in the Arctic, She-Hulk's freezing and has a coat on. Again, it's only there to be funny, but it makes no sense. The strengths of the Hulk character are all over the place. One particular episode, the Shrunk episode. Yeah, okay, the Hulk characters have been shrunk. That doesn't mean they're not going to be super strong, basically the equivalent of like them being an ant's strength. They would still be vastly stronger than a human even at that size. But to be funny again, they can't climb walls, they have problems lifting a golf club, and I'm like, this is not funny, this is stupid, this is ridiculous, and this is not how the Hulk powers work. Another gimmick they loved to force on the show was them having, these weapons and these abilities. This is a problem because Hulk characters are their own weapons. They don't need weapons. Now, to be fair, Scar was the only one who really was supposed to have a weapon. He usually used a blade, but because he's an alien and that was what he liked. Now, Red Hulk is also another exception because, again, he's a military officer. But at the end of the day, them having all these fancy weapons and energy things, it never made any sense. It was just there to sell toys. But ironically, they never actually did sell these weapons and toys. And the show tries to also be kind of clever in some cases where they do point out where it's ridiculous, which is like, oh, okay, you're trying to make fun of what you're doing that's stupid as a fourth wall break, but it doesn't work. I think out of all the main characters, the one I hated the most was Rick Jones. And I felt sorry that Seth Green was playing him. Again, I like him as an actor, and I like him when he's funny. That's where he works best. But Rick Jones is really not supposed to be funny. Yes, he does lighten the mood in the comics and the other past animated series, but at the same time, he's a walking meme. He just, every 5 seconds, Rick Jones is just funny this, funny that. And for the most part, the friendship between Rick and Bruce is lost because of that. Again, that friendship is very important to Hulk's character. That's why I've always complained that Rick was omitted in the movies and the MCU. And yeah, he's here, but because he's not portrayed as he's supposed to be, and he has these superpowers, he's mainly there to act as the way the kids that watch the series understand what's going on, because he's the one who's in training. He has to figure out how to use his powers. But because he's so stupid and trying to be very funny, it just gets on your nerves, and it's just like, this is not Rick. The only real time that I could say Rick is being Rick Jones for real is in the pilot, when he's human. Once he becomes A-bomb, it's just, jokes here, jokes there, even when it's inappropriate, when their lives are in danger. One thing that I can say that's good about the series was the guest heroes and guest villains. Pretty much anyone who appeared in the show, whether it was Spider-Man, Doctor Strange, the Wrecking Crew, Titania, all those characters are accurate. And ironically, this show is the only time Titania is actually Titania anywhere, because they completely destroyed her in the She-Hulk live-action show.
No one fights the absorbing man without going through me.
Oh my God, bro.
Oh, hell.
And what's even more surprising, they did have a couple of episodes with the Wrecking Crew, and I did actually like them, and I did like the direction they were going with, because they were kind of trying to be like, oh, at the beginning, everyone hated each other, everyone was fighting like they're supposed to be. But, at a certain point, they were kind of trying to be like, okay, we know you're dicks, but, you're people, we kind of respect you. One thing that also got on my nerves was the comic book element. Now, in the Hulk show, they did a lot of transitions, and or like when there's like a dramatic thing, like when they're fighting villains, they will do this whole comic book panel thing where they slide in, come in, do it. It's very distracting. Yeah, it's kind of cool to incorporate a comic book element into the show. Sometimes they kind of try to make it look like a cinematic aspect ratio, but then most of the time it's just flying in, being very distracting. I will say, though, they did get better at it. They kind of realized that it was too much of a thing, so they kind of like lowered it down. It was kind of like how I felt with the comedy of the show. If you watch the first 9 episodes of the show, especially episode 9, the shrinking episode, which is the worst episode of the series, every 5 seconds was a joke, someone being stupid, always funny, and it was culminated in this stupid episode of them playing golf. Literally, it was supposed to be like the equivalent of like when X-Men has those day off comics where they're just, having fun, they're playing sports, or they're just talking to each other in one particular episode before a big event. It's kind of like that. But because everything was so stupid, that was when I gave up. You feel like a switch was hit. Like when episode 9 had come out, episode 10 came out, and all of a sudden it was like Thor was the guest hero, and all the whole characters were pretty much acting serious. It was fun, but for the most part, they were saving the world, and they were being superheroes. And I was like, if these episodes had aired earlier, I might have continued on. Now, it doesn't mean they were perfect, no. Even though they kind of leveled off with the jokes, because they were going too far, it still was not a really good show. Another thing that really kind of annoyed me too was the pacing. A lot of times the episodes are way too fast. There was no time to tell a character that this was going on, and it was just immediately skipped over to the resolution of like they already knew and they figured out a way to deal with the problem. So I don't know, this particular series has had a very hard time having a good pacing. Now season 1 was the worst in pacing, but season 2 was a little bit better. It wasn't perfect, but it was better. There was also a particular episode where their spaceship becomes alive. It became sentient. It got an AI out of nowhere. But all of a sudden with this, the ship had these abilities. It could repair itself. It had shields. It had a transforming robot mode. And I'm like, when did these abilities ever happen? They had to have been installed before, but they were never used. And even after this episode where they resolved the whole thing, we never see the repairability of the ship, the shields, and the robot mode until the series finale. So we get introduced to the ship having all these cool features, but they just completely ignore it and avoid it because it would cause plot problems in future episodes. That's how bad they didn't care about the show making sense. They would just do an episode that was stupid, and then they would never follow up and use these elements to it until it was like, oh, a big dramatic moment like the series finale. Characters. How were the characters handled in the show? Hulk, of course, was used the most. He's the star. Followed by Red Hulk, A-Bomb, then She-Hulk. But for the most part, besides Hulk, pretty much everyone got neglected. Red Hulk got the most of his focus episodes. A-Bomb got like 2 or 3. Scar got like 3. But the worst offender was She-Hulk. She only got 1 single episode. And it was dumb. It was mainly about her just, roller skating. It was like the one few times they actually put an element of the character in the show. Oh, we got a race on skates and we're just trying to fight the bad guy while we're rollerblading and things blowing up. But I will say one thing. You would expect a show that's filled with jokes and stupidity, the character that's supposed to be funny, She-Hulk, who had the exact same problem that this show is having in Incredible Hulk Season 2, where she was ridiculously overly funny, all because, in the comic, she can be funny, but there's a hard balance between serious and funny in the comic. You'd think she would have been over the top ridiculous. Instead, she's the complete opposite. Out of everyone in the show, she was the only one who was the least funny. I found it hilarious because I was expecting that character to be completely screwed up with the jokes. Instead, everyone else was. There were some episodes that I really hated, though. Even though I said the show had gotten better, some of the episodes where they were actually, more dramatic, more cooler, it was like a 2-parter. Specifically, one is the Wrecking Crew and them teaming up with Abomination. It was cool, but it had a serious plot hole. Abomination, while the Hulk characters were off the planet, Abomination was setting them up so that they can be, horrible people, and then everyone would want to be against them. That was fine and all, but it was done in some stupid way. The premise was to frame them. So how can you frame a Hulk character? Well, what they did was they had the Wrecking Crew wear these special invisible belts. So when the Hulk characters are fighting them, people can't see them. The Hulks are fighting invisible people. No one knows what they're doing. They think they're just simply attacking the city, so everyone goes against them. The problem is this plot makes no sense for obvious reasons. One, the first thing is that the Wrecking Crew kind of spoiled what the hell was going on, and they told them exactly that the belts were invisible. So I'm saying to myself, Hulk, She-Hulk, Scar, rip the belts off, take them off. Don't do that. Second thing, okay. Yes, the Hulk characters are punching and, destroying your city, and people are filming it and whatnot. Don't you think the people watching, footage or being there in person would have realized Hulk and She-Hulk and everyone else were fighting people? Because how does Hulk get thrown backwards from nothing? Wouldn't you see him be punching air? Wouldn't you see indentations of people slamming into the ground? This plot line does not work. It would have been better if someone framed them directly, meaning holographic technology, and while they were off planet, they didn't do that. They went with this whole invisible thing, and it's just like, this is a dumb plot. This would have worked better if you just did something more logical. So we get dumb episodes like that. You get other problems, like there was an episode with Doctor Strange where they needed to find a specific spell to open a portal, if I'm remembering correctly, and I'm saying to myself, the cameras were recording all this footage. You could have easily had seen what the spell was and looked back at the footage. That's an example of the cameras being a plot hole. Then you have Hulk Agents of Smash Star Trek Voyager, where like the first 5 or 6 episodes, they were literally stuck on their spaceship, lost in space, trying to find Earth. Then you have like really dumb episodes. For example, there was an episode where this huge, massive, crack, fissure had opened up on Earth, and it was, things were going to explode, things were going to fall down it, all the 4 characters are going to be super strong and they're going to be able to like throw rocks to fill in the thing, huge things. Like, I would have buy that, because again, Hulk, all of them, especially if you use all the characters at once, they can lift up probably a mile-size chunk of dirt and fill that gap in. So you know how they solve the problem? Hulk sees the suspension bridge that's broken on both sides. He grabs the cables and he pulls the Earth back together. So you're telling me this random suspension bridge, A, is stronger than Hulk, and B, it's so strong it can pull the planet together. That's the type of writing we're dealing with. Now, are all the episodes bad? No. There are a few episodes that I did genuinely like. I really wish the show had done more episodes like that. There was a particular episode in season 2 which was focusing on the Hulk's fears, and they were being manipulated. I thought that was really cool how we were seeing the inner workings of the characters, and it was showing them as people. They were not just these goofy idiots that were just trying to save the world. But the best episode in the entire season has to go, we finally got to see Bruce again and Betty in the series. Because throughout the entire series, if you were not familiar with the Hulk character, like if you were a kid and this was your first time seeing the Hulk besides from the movies, you would have no idea Hulk can turn into Bruce Banner. They brought in Betty because Betty was missing for this entire thing. And I was like, you need Betty. And it was this whole thing where Betty figured out a way to reverse the process and turn Hulk back into Bruce. On one hand, I really loved the episode because, again, it brought Bruce back. It showed us what the show could be. Literally, if you watch this episode, it could have been in the Incredible Hulk series from the 90s. It's one of those stories where you prove yourself as being the hero, where, like, yes, Bruce's life sucked, and he finally gets a chance to be turned back into a human. And, again, it's one of those, choices where it's like, oh, he has to turn back into Hulk in order to save his family, or let them die and stay Bruce. But if he does this again, he's going to be permanently stuck as the Hulk. But on the other hand, it really ultimately didn't matter, because when Hulk and Bruce merge, so they're basically Professor Hulk, it kind of sullies that moment. The show tries so many different things, and it just doesn't really work. It tries to be dramatic in some episodes, but then it clashes all over the place. You as a viewer, you really don't know how to feel when you're watching episode by episode, and then whenever they throw in a little hint of what a character is supposed to be, it's like you get more annoyed, because there's like a particular episode where the Hulk characters were like imprisoned because, again, they were framed. And there was the scene where Jennifer was in her room and she's like, I'm reading lawyer books. And I'm like, that's not funny. Just because you're referencing what she's supposed to be, that doesn't make it okay for you to change the character in the first place. Because there were many times and many episodes in the show where Jen, being a lawyer, would have gotten them out of a lot of crap. But instead, you wanted to make her a stunt woman with a plot that makes no sense. There was potential in the series. Every show has a potential of being excellent, good. The show felt like there was too many chefs in the kitchen. One person wanted it to be what it's supposed to be. Hulk, dramatic, and you have all these extra characters. And that, I would say, that's Paul Dini's side. And then there's the other side, Jeff Loeb's side, who wanted it to be funny, comical, stupid, because you can see how he writes in the Red Hulk saga, for example. He does write dumb, goofy moments with characters, or he doesn't really understand the character perfectly. Like, he's good writing Hulk, don't get me wrong. He has written good comic issues, but there are a lot of times where he will not care that She-Hulk is acting out of character just to make a plot work in his story. So it feels like he wanted to make the show more funny, maybe because they thought, well, if the show's funny, kids will watch it, toys will sell. Ironically, the toys for Hulk Agents of Smash did not sell. They hardly released anything. She-Hulk never even got a figurine. I think only Hulk and A-Bomb got figures, and that's the reason why Hulk Agents of Smash only got 2 seasons, while like Ultimate Spider-Man got multiple seasons because the toys sold pretty good. The show progressively got better. I felt sorry for the voice cast because everyone they hired was good. I mean, you had Fred Tatasciore, who's played a lot of the Hulk for many years. He's always done a good job of playing Hulk, and this was like his few times where he's actually able to voice the character versus, having broken dialogue or just grunting. We had Clancy Brown as Red Hulk. He would have been perfect because, again, Red Hulk is the evil asshole character. He's perfect for that type of role. Scar, again, I mean, he was more of a laughingstock because, again, he was basically Hulk, mindless Hulk. I really didn't like that. I was just like, they wasted the character. All of the background of Sakaar and all that was wrapped up within 2 episodes. She-Hulk, I don't even want to talk about. Like, everything about her was lost. She was no longer a lawyer. She was a stunt woman, which was kind of cool. I mean, it's a sliver of her, it's a sliver of what she would do, because She-Hulk has done movies and done things. She would be a stunt woman in movies. It makes perfect sense. If you're invulnerable, that would be a perfect job. It's just like I always said, if you didn't want to be a superhero and you were Hulk, you would be best to open a moving company, for example. Use that strength to your advantage. Yeah, I did say that Seth Green can be comical and he's funny and he's good for that, but he can do serious roles too. So I wouldn't have minded if Seth Green was voicing Rick Jones, but normal Rick Jones. And that brings me up to the thing. I really believe that if you wanted to have all these gimmicks of weapons, jets and ships and all this type of stuff in the show, where it would have worked rather than having the Hulk characters who are weapons, use weapons, that didn't make any sense, have Rick be human. If he had stayed human, he would have been the one who would be perfect to be using weapons. Because again, he's human, he needs to be able to work with the Hulk characters rather than just being, a liability. You would want him to be, useful in the show. Give him the weapons, give him the gear, give him the jets, give him all that so that he can, if the Hulks are jumping across the country, he can use the jet to fly with them. Simple as that. But they didn't do that. Rick turned into A-Bomb, everyone was stupid. Would I recommend the series? Yes and no. You'll be disappointed in it just being kind of a carbon copy of Ultimate Spider-Man. If you liked Ultimate Spider-Man, you're just going to be like, why am I watching this show? If you're a fan of the Hulk character, She-Hulk character, Scar, Red Hulk, I really say do not watch the show. You'll be vastly disappointed. The only positives are the guest heroes. For the most part, Doctor Strange, Thor, Iron Man, Spider-Man, Nick Fury, all those characters that appear, they are handled pretty well. The villains, for the most part, are good. The Wrecking Crew, and of course Leader's in this show. He was pretty much portrayed properly. He really lined up to his 90 counterpart. Yeah, they kind of crossed certain areas where he was a little too buffoony, but then they would scale it back and go right back to where he's supposed to be. So there was a perfect balance of the funny with him and the seriousness with him as well. And I did like how the show was wrapped up. It didn't like get canceled and then it had no ending. It was a pretty good ending. But yeah, between all these issues and everything, the show was not good. What really shocked me the most was Paul Dini being involved with this. Like, Paul Dini is one of the core reasons why Batman the Animated Series was so successful in the 90s, because he wrote some really excellent episodes. You know, Heart of Ice. He created the Harley Quinn character that people love. He's done so much, and when you see his name on, like, Hulk, I was like, oh my God, we finally got someone really good that will handle this character. It's perfect because Hulk, in a lot of ways, is like Batman. There's similar parallels. Being dark, serious, having a horrible life. Paul Dini can definitely write that character, and it does shine in the series here and there. But it's like Jeff Loeb, when he was the executive producer of these two shows, he just did not allow Paul to actually do anything properly, and it suffered greatly. So if I had to rate all the Hulk shows that are currently existed right now, this would definitely be on the low end. Incredible Hulk Season 1 is still the #1 show out of all the Hulk shows, followed by the 80s show, the 60s show, the 70s series, Season 2 of Incredible Hulk, this show, and then finally the live-action She-Hulk, because really nothing can forgive that show. Would I like another Hulk show to come back? Of course, but with the recence of She-Hulk being horrible, I really don't have any type of hope for any animated series or in general. It's just like the Hulk characters, unfortunately, either get like shoved to the wayside or they get completely destroyed by people who don't know how to write them. They don't know how to find the balance of serious and fun. At the end of the day, you're just trying to follow a big green guy that's trying to save lives and being tormented day by day.